please welcome President of Stony Brook University, Andrea Goldsmith.
Thank you. Welcome to this wonderful panel. I'm really thrilled to participate in our third of our presidential panels by hearing from some of our outstanding Stony Brook community members, including some alums. So today we have with us Stony Brook alumni, a current Stony Brook medical student, and a great supporter and partner to our special institution. They've all come together to share their insights in our innovation and entrepreneurship panel. Now, I myself am an entrepreneur, maybe a recovering entrepreneur. I started 2 companies. I've also worked in academia and research lab industry and nonprofits. And I find this to be an incredibly exciting topic. When we think about innovation, entrepreneurship, and what does that actually mean? Is it just about starting companies? Is it innovating within a big company or a university or a big organization? I'm really looking forward to hearing that perspective from all of our panelists who are coming at it from different stages of their careers and different ways that they've driven innovation. And as we shape a bold vision for this exceptional university, the #1 university in New York State, one of the things that we really want to have an impact on is taking our great ideas out of our research labs, out of our classrooms, and into real world impact. And whether that means starting companies around it or going into big companies and innovating or nonprofits, that is a huge goal that we have here for Stony Brook University to turn Long Island, which I now refer to as Silicon Island, into a thriving technology and med tech hub to drive job growth, economic growth, and prosperity across this wonderful region. And workforce development is truly central to our mission as a public university, as an engine of upward mobility. Stony Brook is one of the few universities in the AAU, the top 71 research institutions in the country, that is Carnegie classification for upward mobility. We take students who are in the lower 20% of income levels and lift them into the top 20% of income levels. And so a lot of that is about workforce development. How do we prepare our students for their professional and personal lives? And we also want to offer channels not just to our students and our faculty and our staff, but to the whole community to take advantage of having this vibrant university here in Stony Brook to take your ideas into fruition. And we do that through things like Wolfie Tank and our CWIT programs, which empower and expand support, not just for the people at Stony Brook, our faculty and students and our staff and our postdocs, but for community members to introduce to them the fact that their brilliant ideas can actually have transformative impact. And that's how I think about innovation. It's really taking brilliant ideas and translating them into real world impact. So today's discussion is really about bringing ideas to life. And it's truly an honor and pleasure to have all 4 of these prestigious panelists to join me, not just for this panel, but as part of my inauguration. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce them to you. They will talk about their own entrepreneurial efforts, including obstacles they faced and the milestones they achieved in getting to the places that they are now and the milestones they hope to achieve in the future. So I don't have time to go through the detailed introductions of these amazing people, so I'll just do a few highlights about their remarkable accomplishments. So I'm going to start with Kelly Kahn. She's a 3rd-year medical student in the Renaissance School of Medicine. She founded Dermatological, so she's already a founder even though she's still a student. This is a community-based organization that promotes skin health and dermatological education, and it was founded in 2021, so it's not a brand new startup at this point. And since its founding 5 years ago, it's expanded nationally. It now has 15 branches and over 300 members across academic institutions in the US. And for the incredible work that they do, it's already won multiple awards. So let's give Kelly a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have one of our amazing Stony Brook alumna. Lori Olson. She's a seasoned pharmaceutical executive with more than 30 years. You don't look old enough to have more than 30 years of experience in commercial and corporate innovation experience. Most recently, serving as the Executive Vice President of Strategy, Portfolio, and Commercial Operations at Pfizer Incorporated. In that role, she's used new technologies and analytical methods to drive R&D and commercial productivity and facilitate corporate strategic planning. And I'm so delighted that we have someone who's been an innovator in a very big, well-established company, but one that's also incredibly innovative. And we saw that with the COVID vaccines that Pfizer did so incredibly well and so quickly. So please join me in welcoming Lori. Our next panelist is another Stony Brook alum, Derek Peterson, who I've had the honor and pleasure to get to meet at a number of alumni events where he got to grill me, so now I get to grill him. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Soder Technologies, which is an engineering and manufacturing company focused on addressing global challenges through innovative technology solutions. He holds more than 80 patents, wow, including the world's first vape detector, and has established a scholarship and a donor-funded faculty position at Stony Brook to further aid students' scholarly pursuits. We're so grateful to your support of your alma mater, and we're grateful to have you here. Let's give a round of applause today. And last, we have Lawrence Geist. He's the CEO and president of Spellman High Voltage Electronics Corporation, which is a family-owned business established in 1947. So it's been around a little while, probably seen a few ups and downs in that time. Under Lauren's leadership, the company is focused on innovation and organizational development, international growth, and environmental sustainability, which is another important aspect of growing a company and making sure that it's sustainable. He's also partnered with Stony Brook to create the Spellman High Voltage Electronics Laboratory, which, thank you so much for that. And the purpose of the lab is to encourage more interest and collaboration within high voltage research, which is important not just to your company, but to many companies and to the country and to the world when it comes to high voltage grid and the impact of that. So I very much appreciated Lauren's partnership and friendship over the 8 months of my presidency. He's a remarkable and inspiring leader, as well as a treasured friend. So thank you, Lauren, for being with us today. Thank you. So I'm going to start with a question, a general question for all the panelists, so any of you can jump in as you wish. Each of you has driven innovation in very different contexts, whether it was in established companies or companies that you helped to establish and grow, as well as in startups. How do you define innovation? How have you used it? And how have you built a team and a culture to foster it? So anybody can speak up.
Well, I'll jump in first. So how do I define innovation? In my world, it's always, how do I think outside the box? And so being an engineer, the nature of an engineer is to solve a problem. So I'm always like, I'm presenting a problem set, a real world problem, and can I think outside the box to solve this problem and solve the challenge by myself? And so in doing that, I like to get people around me who are smarter than me to actually get it done, and usually getting some undergrad students from Stony Brook come work in my labs, and we're going to tackle this problem.
So yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So in our world, innovation, I think, really started with the end user, and in the case of pharmaceuticals, it was the patient. So we really tried to start by putting ourselves into the shoes of patients. What are their biggest needs? What are their biggest frustrations with our business? And how do we come up with new ideas to solve those? And in terms of culture, I think, in a big organization, you can't rely on a small group of people to innovate for everything. It has to be ingrained in the entirety of the organization. So we spend a lot of time really trying to embed kind of an innovation mindset in the bigger
It's got to be in the DNA.
Exactly. And that's the way we talked about it. How can we have an innovation DNA?
How do you do that in a big company that already has an established culture?
Yeah, so it's hard. On the one hand, there's a lot of enablers for innovation in a big company. So, if I was working on a new project, I could walk down the hall and I could talk to a patent attorney. I could walk down the other hall and I could talk to a financial expert or a social media expert. But on the downside, it was an organization with about 100,000 people in it. And trying to make decisions in that kind of an organization is really hard. So, it would be like, silly example. If I were to take everybody in this section right here and say, okay, I'm going to put you in a room, and I want you to decide what we're all going to have for dinner tonight. That's kind of how big organizations work. There's a lot of committees and a lot of people that have to weigh in. But chances are you would come out of that room with like a bowl of lettuce. Like that's dinner. Because trying to get that many people to agree on something innovative and that's going to meet everybody's needs, it sort of devolves to the least common denominator. And you end up with something that kind of everybody can tolerate, but nobody really wants it. Nobody really wants a bowl of lettuce. So that's sort of the downside in a big organization. And to overcome those kinds of things, I mean, a big part of it, I think, is cultural.
It's cultural, but the cultural...
I'd love to hear what you have.
So in my career, when I worked at the bigger companies, one of the companies I worked for was a company called Symbol Technologies, which is now Zebra. The founder, Jerry Schwartz, he was a scientist himself. So he instilled the DNA that we need to be inventors. And so you look down as an engineer if you weren't inventing something new, if you didn't have patents. So we had a whole patent wall in the organization, and so you strive to put your patent on that wall. So it was already built into us that we're going to be engineers, we're going to have patents, we're going to release a new patent every year. And like you said, there's patent attorneys down the hall, so we can always just generate these patents all the time. So it's got to come from the leadership top down. And now when I start my small company, and we had 5,000 people there, now I go back down to like just under 50 people. I'm the generator of the ideas, and I instill in everybody, we're going to invent new stuff. And they think of me as the mad scientist. What is this guy drinking right now? But it puts that DNA into the culture. So now, from my interns or somebody in marketing or whoever, everybody's thinking about, how do I solve this problem? The customer came up with this issue. How do we solve this problem? So everybody's wheels are always turning now to problem solve.
Lauren, what about you, having been in a family-owned business?
One thing that really helps is to get a leader like you. In Spelman, we had an issue before we really became engaged with Stony Brook in terms of our engineering leadership, which 25 years ago was innovative, but in recent years had tended to recycle known circuits and so on. So ultimately we had to get a new leader for engineering, and I was exploring developing more of a relationship with Stony Brook, and he really was enthusiastic about that and went all in. And it was part of his remaking the culture within our engineering community. So what does that mean? We had avoided getting patents because for many years, I don't know the real reason, but what we said was you give away more information than you protect. But we started recognizing our staff and started developing records of invention and patents. He developed career paths, which you could either go into individual contributor technology development and so on, or into a management thing if you happen to be afflicted with the management kind of gene and you like managing people. It's very different than inventing things. And then in partnering with Stony Brook, one of the challenges of our model, which is basically custom design solutions for original equipment manufacturers. So they'll come with us with the problem, and then we'll custom design a solution. Is that when you do it that way, you're under a lot of time pressure. And when you're under time pressure on an engineering development, you really can't be terribly creative. You've got to reuse known technology. So by being able to work with Stony Brook staff and start some R&D, which was not connected with specific customer requirements that are always time pressured, we're able to really address certain fundamental issues which will help us increase power density, control of the output, and the reliability under adverse circumstances. So really, so when customers come to us with a challenge, we'll have something that we can apply to it and then fully validate it. So this partnership with Stony Brook has really been an important part of establishing that kind of innovative culture in our design.
That's wonderful to hear, and I always say that when I'm asked, what is it that universities bring to solving problems, and so much of it is our students, because they don't necessarily know what they can't do. They're dreamers, they are creative, they're bold. I learn more from students than they learn from me, for sure. And I think it is that mindset of just wanting to change the world and not knowing what's not possible that students bring as part of innovation, which now I will turn to our student on the panel. So Kelly, how do you define innovation, and how have you used it and built a team and culture in your company to foster it?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about this. So going off of what all these wonderful individuals talked about, I think it's also building that culture of excellence. So dermatological, we started at UCLA and we have our branch, and now we're found at Stony Brook, we're found at University of California, Berkeley, at San Diego, at Drexel, at all these wonderful places. And when you have all these different groups, it is really difficult to coordinate that leadership. I think you have to be very flexible and very open-minded. So at UCLA, when we built that branch, and that's our cultural hub and our center of excellence, and then we began expanding out, it's hard to have those other branches also have our vision when we're not physically there. But then when we're able to build that culture of excellence, and our branch focuses on acne and on sun safety, but other branches, they might have the flexibility to focus on eczema or on education. And I think it's also that flexibility of our branch may not be the best because another branch may do something better than us. And it's also having that inclusive mindset of saying, okay, this branch does this better, this branch does this better, so let's incorporate all of those different aspects into our branch. And when you have that culture, all the different branches are kind of competing with each other to try to be better than everyone else, and it's that healthy competitive environment that's going to propel dermatological forward. Because at the end of the day, all these branches are rooted in that culture of excellence, and we're all pushing each other forward to push that sun safety education initiative and to push all our initiatives forward. And so I think innovation is also putting yourself outside of the box. Like one of the individuals talked about, when I first started my journey, a lot of people told me, you can't do medicine and business together. These two things are very mutually exclusive. But I found that when you want to do something, don't be scared to put yourself out there. As students, you have so many resources at your fingertips. You have the wonderful resources of Stony Brook. I was able to bring my ideas to campus, and this university has just been so receptive to my ideas and to my innovation. And so I'm really grateful for having that opportunity here.
That's wonderful, and I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate you on the Wolfie Tank win. Let's give them a round of that. And I'm wondering how, Derek, for example, there was no competition like that when you were starting your company. How do things like Wolfie Tank or other activities that we do on our campus to help promote entrepreneurship, how do you think they help? Do they help? And if so, how?
I think the university does a wonderful job of translating from an idea to an actual prototype. I came in with an idea and a prototype already, and I was able to get so far in mentorship and talking to startups and investors, and I was able to go from Wolfie Tank to Long Island Regionals to New York State business competition. And I think when you have that support to turn an idea into something tangible and continue working on that, I think that's going to be your best support and your best network. I think this university has so many wonderful resources that if you just go digging, because it is very difficult. I came from UCLA where there's such a huge student body, so you really have to go find your own opportunities. But once you make those connections and you find those resources, it's a lot easier to have that network under you, which I think Stony Brook does a great job of doing. Yeah.
And so Derek, you didn't have these kinds of support systems or Wolfie Tank or other competitions and mentors. And you founded your company over a decade ago and stayed at its home. And sometimes, you know, the founding CEO gets booted out or decides that that isn't what they want to continue doing. To be the founder and then CEO over a decade, you've seen many transitions, many challenges and inflection points for your company. So how were you supported when you first started your company? If you were, you just went out on a limb and did it on your own. And then how did you navigate these transitions both as a founder and as a leader? Because the founder CEO is a special element to a startup and a startup success.
So how was I founded? How was I supported, you say? So there's multiple ways I was supported. So supported mentally through my family. Supported also mentally through mentors that I had along the way. I needed people to give me guidance in how to actually pull off what I wanted to pull off. And then financially, part of it was just bootstrapped for my companies. And then I was able to talk to people, which I tell every young student here, you have to know how to market yourself and be able to speak. And so I was able to raise money when I need to raise money. And that was, I guess, a gift, because I never had an issue with it. A quick story, I knew when I launched this company here, our product was taking off. We make, so at SADA, one of our products that pays all the bills is our vape detector. It detects people are vaping. And in 2017, we launched this product, and next thing you know, I'm sitting in front of Good Morning America on TV and talking about this vape detector, and they're actually doing a live demo with it. But truth be told, that detector didn't really work. A lot of smoke and mirrors, and I'm like literally on national TV. But they did tell me that you better make sure you have an answering service because the phone's going to ring off the hook. And I said, okay, so we did hire an answering service, which we still have the same company that supports our phone systems. And lo and behold, the phone rang off the hook, and I thought myself now, oh wow, now I really got to make it work. Because the orders just came in, unbelievable amount. And so that gets back to the funding. I took a trip down to Florida to meet a wealthy doctor over one dinner we had. Next thing you know, by the time I got back to New York the next day, he's wiring me $750,000 without any contracts, without any paperwork. He says, we'll figure out the paperwork later. Let's get the product done. Let's get you to market, and let's make it happen. And so I was just able to properly express my thoughts, my ideas, and the rest just came. And so I've been able to successfully do that over the course of my career. And then when I start to building what I've learned through the going and growing the companies is that you have to put the right team in place. So I need people that are going to see the vision and want to run with me and live up to the challenges, because it's not easy starting a company. And this is actually my third startup. And so I knew what it took to start the other two. And I told my wife I'm going to do another one. She's like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? But I was able to assemble the same team. A lot of times I'm able to pull from my past companies I've been at. I take the same merry men and women with me and say, we're going over here now to do another thing. So I have a new idea. And I bring that same core group of people with me, and we continue to grow. And I'll tell you another fun fact. For me personally, when I'm building my team out, I look for people that are, one, energetic, don't know the word, don't realize they can't do something, like you were talking about the young students here. Then I also take somebody who is competitive in some way of their life. They don't have to be an athlete, but I want to know that you actually have the chops that you want to fight for something. And so you can, whatever it may be, I don't care, but I want to know that, okay, you want to win. So if I have those personalities in trait, then I can build a team with that. Then you also have to know that you're not always going to pick the right person. And so you have to be willing to let somebody go, unfortunately. And that's probably where I'm the hardest on myself, because I always I'll give you one more chance. I give you one more chance. Knowing that they're not really fitting the team in the mold. And so that's where, if I do anything wrong, I let people hang on too long.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think I've learned in all of my different leadership and startup roles is that when you know someone's the wrong person, it's very hard. It's human nature to want to give them another chance and want to try to mentor them, bring them along, but it can be so damaging to them and to you and to the organization. So making that decision, which is a really hard human decision to make, is always the right one, because by the time you've realized that someone's the wrong person for the role, it's probably been that way for quite a long time, and so it's hard to pull the trigger. Laura, you talked a little bit about doing innovation in a big company, and so I wanted to ask you, if you were CEO of Pfizer for a day, what would you change about the culture within Pfizer that would lead to more innovation? And also, have you ever thought, it's just too hard to innovate in a big company, why don't I go join a startup or start my own company?
So last part first.
Okay.
I always thought there was a way forward. I think when you have a group of well-meaning people who are all pulling in the right direction, it's more about just removing the barriers that are stopping them as opposed to, I'm out of here.
Right.
So I was always very optimistic about getting it done in that organization. But I think, looking back, I think one of the biggest cultural issues was fear of failure. So fear of screwing up. And if I go out on a limb and I stake my reputation on this and I spend the company's money on this and I gather this group of people around me and it crashes and burns, that's going to be bad for my career. It's going to damage my self-esteem. People are going to look at me differently. I'm going to be viewed as this terrible failure, and it's really going to have these dire consequences. So one of the things I tried to do was, first of all, to reframe failure. So take any great innovation, it's built on a failure from whoever came before that. That's the whole scientific method. You learn from other people's failures and you fix it and you move on and you create an incremental innovation that works. So I tried to reframe failure as not a terrible thing, but as a necessary part of the process to get to the end game. But that's easier said than done, because people in our culture, and I think in a lot of company cultures, you celebrate the person who had the big win. Oh my God, look at what they did. And you put them on a pedestal and you pay them a lot of money. You don't celebrate the person who failed before that enabled that person to have the big win, and yet you should. So
Right.
I tried to do that. So I tried, if people took a really well-considered risk on a new innovation, and they failed, but we learned from it, I tried to celebrate them. And I tried to also reflect that in their compensation as well. The other thing is we would sometimes have people who would innovate themselves out of a job. And obviously with AI, we're having talking a lot about that conversation about does innovation eliminate jobs. And this person basically killed a drug that really had a low likelihood of success, but they were the manager of that drug. And people were looking very, very carefully at how we treated this person. Is he going to be out? Is he going to do something else? What are people going to say about him? And we made absolutely sure that he was redeployed to another product and had a very successful career for a number of years after that. But people look very carefully about how you treat people who fail. And I use that in quotes because it's not necessarily a failure. So we really tried to focus a lot on that in terms of culture. We also tried to protect people, kind of give them air cover if they were doing something that was really out there. So, when you're really trying something that's way, way out of the box, there's going to be a lot of people who are like, no, that's not how we do it. That's too risky. It's going to cost too much money. So what I try to do as a leader is handle all of that chatter around them and let them focus on getting the job done. And that seemed to help with it too.
Yeah, one of the things I saw with so many decades in Silicon Valley is that failure was, if not celebrated, viewed as an incredibly important component of being an entrepreneur. That if you start a company and it failed, you learned something and you were more likely to get funding the next time. That's an unusual element of Silicon Valley, one that I think we need to foster more here. And if you look at Europe, for example, why there isn't more of a startup culture there, it's an older, more staid culture where failure is not viewed in quite as positive light. So I'm wondering, all of you, since we're talking about failure, if you could share with the audience a failure that you encountered, what you learned from it, and how you got beyond it.
Oh, failure comes in a lot of ways. So in regards to a product launch, you're not always going to have a home run with every product. And so you can consider that a failure. So in my world, in regards to failure, I've got to learn to fail fast, fail nicely, and really get back up again. And so when we started Solder Technologies, we were originally called a company called Digital Fly, because we were doing social media monitoring. And if you ever hear the expression, if you want to be a fly on the wall, I wanted to be a fly on the wall in the social media space. And so we're monitoring social media for threats. And that product, although a great idea, it wasn't really being adopted to our marketplace, which was schools. We're trying to help schools identify threats to students and teachers. But unfortunately, the principals and superintendents did not want to know the truth of what was going on. And so we were kind of failing at that. And so watching myself fail, when you think of fail, then you'll think of the word pivot. So we've got to pivot and do something different. And so we pivoted and started creating hardware devices. We went from a software company to become a hardware manufacturing company. We pivoted, and that's when we took off. So as you said, failure made me see something else that we can do, and then we grew from there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not so hard to think of incidents of failure. Although I define it, I try to define it anyway as more as a negative result from an experiment. And of course, it's harder to publish a paper with a negative result, but you learn just as much. So as long as you're learning from it, I don't think of it as a failure. I try to convince myself and others of that in any case with mixed results. So as I was mentioning before, our design principles, the way we went about designing power supplies was based on really doing largely completely custom designs for different solutions. When COVID hit, disrupting the supply chains, we had a very high mix of low volume products, and and we used and reused designs for many years, because high voltage, if you find a part that is reliable and does what you want it to do, there aren't that many high voltage components that do that, so you tend to reuse it. So all of a sudden we ran into tremendous obsolescence issues and just unavailability issues. And that kicked off a re-examination of our design principles. And then most recently, that was reinforced when we had a fire in our subassembly manufacturing plant, which we're currently working our way through. And in that fire, it destroyed our inventory, which contained a lot of obsolete parts and last-time buys that we had gotten. So all of a sudden, our engineering effort on redesigning is front and center. And we're re-examining our design principles in terms of modularity, in terms of really looking at risk during the design process, and of deploying a proactive product lifecycle management process, all these things that somehow had a lower priority before when we were just trying to meet the design requests from our customers. So it is very important for strengthening us for the future.
So I have a lot of big failures to draw upon, but
And you're still standing. You still have a job.
But so one that comes to mind was a product for diabetes that we were working on earlier in my career. And I don't know how many, if any of you have diabetes or you're close to someone who has diabetes. But when you have this disease, you have to inject yourself with insulin typically, and multiple times a day, usually around mealtime. Nobody likes needles. Nobody wants to do this. So the innovation was inhaled insulin, which I just fell in love with as a concept. I thought, this is amazing. It's going to take needles out of the equation. People will get better treatment. They'll have better health outcomes. They'll have fewer heart attacks. It's going to be amazing. And I and many people just absolutely rallied around this thing. Well, the product was just fraught with like challenge after challenge. And just try to imagine this. You have this giant plastic thing, like a pop-up device. You put a little powdered insulin in it. You put it up to your mouth and you pull a trigger and you breathe it in. Well, like what happens if you sneeze? Like what if you cough? Like, do you take another one? Then are you going to get too much? We also found that a lot of people with diabetes at the time were smokers. And we worried about lung function. Are they getting the full dose? Are they not getting the full dose? So what happened is, and it got tied up in the regulatory environment for like a decade. Meanwhile, in the real world, insulin needles were becoming really, really tiny. So this whole process of injecting yourself for insulin was really not as big a deal as it was when we came up with this amazing idea. So the world was changing around us, but boy, we stuck with it. This is going to be amazing. And we tried and tried. It actually came out on the market. We sold a dozen of these things. But patients were telling us, they were like, look, good in theory, but frankly, I'd rather have a little tiny needle that I can barely feel than carry around this contraption, that I don't even know how to use. But the problem was, and this the big learning for me to your point, was we hung on way too long. And I think I worked with a lot of scientists, and I think sometimes people think scientists are completely data-driven. They only listen to the facts. But scientists are people, and they have emotions, and they get attached to the things that they spent their career working on. And we just couldn't let go. And I think the other thing was, there's a name for this, I think it's the fallacy of sunk costs, something like that. But you think about all the costs that you invested in this thing. It's like, well, I can't give up now because I invested all this money. But that's just throwing good money after bad. So it finally died. And the person that ultimately killed it, put it out of its misery, was a brand new person who came into the organization, a new CFO. And he looked at all the things we were doing and he said, why are we doing this? And we all kind of looked at each other like, yeah, really good question. Why are we doing this? But it took someone with a new mindset who didn't have all the biases and all the baggage that we did in order to finally make the right decision. Mm-hmm. And I think people like that are sort of the unsung heroes of innovation. Like, putting the nail in the coffin, I think, is just as important a part of the process for something that's not going to work than developing that great idea sometimes.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, as watching many innovators throughout my career, especially engineers, we fall in love with technology. And we think this is such a great widget, everybody's going to want it. And we don't realize that just because we're in love with it doesn't mean that it has any value at all. And it does take a long time to realize that it's the wrong thing to be selling. Kelly.
Yeah, I can finish. So with dermatological, we talk so much about the branches that we have, the multiple awards that we have, all these business pitches that we've won, but we don't really talk about the branches that have failed. With dermatological, as national president, I choose the presidents of the other branches, And I usually do it through an interview basis, and then we have them shadow our organization for a couple of months, and then we have all these safeguards in place. We teach them the language of dermatological. We teach them how to email, how to talk with marketing, how to talk with PR, how to do social media, and these are all language things that you learn as you go through. Like I call dermatological a brand, and as you go through the brand, you kind of learn the language of the brand. And so maybe sometimes we do pick the wrong people to lead a dermatological branch. So for example, I can kind of think of one in Pennsylvania that we started at a university, and this person was just the wrong fit. It does take a little bit of discernment and time for me to decide, does this person truly have the passion for skin health and education, or are they doing it for like a resume padding, as a lot of students like to do so. I think it's hard to get opportunities of leadership on your resume, so I can definitely see why students do that. But now that I do so many interviews and I interview all these candidates that want to start a position at their academic institution, it takes me probably like the first 30 seconds in an interview, and I see, is this person a good fit? Are they going to run with me? Are they going to take the momentum of this organization and create a branch on their own that has their own essence and their own leadership and ideas that they want to put into it? I don't want someone who's going to not necessarily be able to have the charisma and the drive and the leadership to not be able to run this branch. So it takes a very special person and a very special personality to run with the organization, and we've made many wrong choices before, but, and you know, those conversations are really hard to have, but I think these conversations are very necessary in order to say, maybe you're not the right fit, we need to go with someone else in order to push the organization forward. And so those are some of the things that we don't necessarily talk about, but it's things that we take with us when we choose the next leaders, because with dermatological, we have a national board, and then we have presidents, so we currently have 15 to 16 presidents, and then we have interim presidents that are shadowing the presidents now. And so it's quite a large organization, and the presidents have subcommittees under them, and then they have their members themselves. And so I think discerning who to lead and then when to let go, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that failure isn't just about a product that fails, but a failed choice of a leader or somebody to drive something forward. And that's just as devastating to an organization or an innovation as picking the wrong thing to innovate. I want to return to the topic of partnerships and collaboration that Lauren brought up earlier. So we value so much your collaboration and partnership with Stony Brook. Thinking more broadly than Stony Brook, it's hard to do that as the president. I think the whole universe revolves around Stony Brook, but there is a universe outside Stony Brook. From your perspective, what kind of external collaborations with universities, startups, other industries has been most valuable to your organization's growth and innovation? And then for the rest of you, what other collaborations have really driven innovation or success in your company? So Lauren, I'll have you start.
Well, the most important clearly is with our customers. My father coined a phrase, homologation, to describe multi-level communication links with customers. These are original equipment manufacturers, so trying to develop trusting relationships with the engineering teams, quality with quality, production with production, and so on. And ultimately, where this has evolved into a real strategic partnership where we can have meetings with the customer engineering to engineering, where we can share with them what we see happening in terms of the high voltage power conversion technology, and they can share with us where they're going, trying to go in terms of advancing their technology and kind of brainstorming. So the ability to really design something that solves the specific problem that customer has. It's similar to that the nasal insulin. You've added a perspective. I think the doctor that first developed the concept went to medical school with me. So I'm going to check with you later, and because I think he was mystified as to why it didn't succeed at the level he was hoping. But in any case, you described, the importance of really understanding the end user, what their needs were. various stories about that, but there's that's really valuable, that kind of partnership.
Other partnership? Words of wisdom? Experiences?
Well, so in regards to collaboration and partnership, you have to have an open mind, in my book. And so not an open mind, but the platforms we've built has open architecture. So we have different partnership and collaboration. We have technology partners that allow other devices to leverage our platform. And so that therefore it makes my systems have a bigger landscape to play in it. And so we have other companies that come to us now and say, can we partner with you and collaborate on ideas to solve XYZ problems now, because we see your platform can be leveraged to manage our devices. So if you think of the world of IoT, Internet of Things, we have this robust IoT platform, and now what other devices can I plug and play onto that to manage these third-party devices? And that's been a big win for us. So that was just a collaboration. And that was led by one of my engineers, who's also a Stony Brook grad, my VP of engineering. He says we need to make our system have an open architecture, because there will be a world where we want other devices to plug and play with us. But then inside of my small company, I need to have different departments collaborate with each other, which sometimes can drive me crazy. When I take somebody from a bigger company who comes to work for me, they get so siloed. I'm engineering only, I'm manufacturing only, and it's always they're wrong. I said, no, we've got to collaborate, guys. Can we go in the conference room and just talk and share ideas? I'm sure we can solve the problem. So not only do you have collaboration outside the company, but you need to have it inside the four walls too.
That's a really good point. In universities also. Other thoughts on collaboration?
Yeah, for dermatological, we rely mainly on partnerships to fuel our sunscreen samples. So in the beginning, when we were first starting out, I remember our first partnership with Sunbum, and we were all really excited about this collaboration. And also in the beginning, you have to kind of be willing to partner with everyone, because you don't really have that value yet, so you have to get your name out there in terms of marketing, in terms of visibility. In LA, our first partnership we were doing on Santa Monica Pier, and we were handing out sunscreen samples, talking about dermatological, giving out business cards. And then I remember one particular partnership, a sunscreen company came to us and they said, we'd love to sponsor you, we'll give you XYZ amount of dollars, we'll do this campaign with you, but we'd like to be the sole monopoly of that campaign. And so that got me thinking for a little bit that yes, we might have all that monetary backing and all that advertisement, but then we lose a little bit of autonomy. And what is our mission statement? Our mission statement is to make sunscreen accessible to everyone. And so this company, it's priced at a pretty high price point for sunscreen unit price. And so relying on our mission statement, that's not really something we want to pursue. So as you continue to build that business, then you can start declining partnerships and saying this doesn't really align with our business or our mission statement, and you kind of start to develop that discernment and where you fit in with other partners. And so I think that's important too. They're, at the end of the day, a strategic relationship. You provide them with something and they want something from you. And so I think it's always important to think about, okay, what do they want from me? What are they benefiting from me? But also, what am I gaining from them? And is it worth it? So with our sunscreen dispensers, just like a small area on the sunscreen dispenser for marketing, it costs so much just to have advertisement, and so that's also something that we have value in, and it's something that we have to think about when we do partnerships.
So I want to talk about leadership, because leadership in innovation and entrepreneurship is particularly challenging because you're doing something risky, you're doing something new. So how did you learn how to lead as innovators? And how do you approach the challenge of leading innovation? Lauren, I'll start with you.
Look, I practiced psychiatry for 25 years. That was my dream. And I still remember in college when the social worker who was leading a halfway house for chronic patients that I participated in told me that, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing, that really listening is 90% of helping. At which point I began to realize I wasn't such a great listener. But nonetheless, I've kept that in mind. So as a leader, listening and really trying to understand the content of what they're saying, what they're not saying, what they're feeling, has been, I would say, a really important characteristic of being able to enhance their ability to develop, to perform, to work with others, and so on.
Yeah, and I think in terms of my leadership, I tried to always encourage people to look outside the walls of our organization. So just an example, we were having a real trouble with our relationship with some specialists, some doctors. And I think everybody recognized we needed to have a better customer service mentality. Like there was something about the way that we were just treating our customers in general that just wasn't resonating with this very specific group. And we did a lot of work and brainstorming, and at some point we said, well, who are organizations outside of pharmaceuticals that have fabulous customer service reputations? And someone said, my parents just got back from a Four Seasons hotel, and they said they have never felt so well treated as they did when they went to that hotel. And we actually had a meeting with the leadership of the hotel chain, and they talked to us about their philosophy of customer service. And it was just one meeting for an hour, but boy, we learned so much about their mentality and how they put the customer first. It really, even though it had absolutely no bearing on pharmaceuticals from a business perspective, the vibe of it, the mentality of it really, I think, resonated with us. Another time we were having trouble with our workplace environment. Everyone had an office, and our work rules were very specific. You had to dress a certain way when you came to work. It was a very kind of a regimented culture for a lot of years, and people hated it. So we started thinking about, what organizations kind of turn that on their head? And somebody said, well, I have a friend that works at Google, down in the meatpacking district. So we all packed up and we went down to Google for a day, and people had their dogs with them. It was just amazing. Now, we didn't change anything. We never brought our dogs to work, but it just sort of showed us, well, here's the outer edge of the possibilities that you can achieve with a workplace environment. And maybe we can't go all the way there, but maybe we can go part of the way there. Maybe we can do a few things to get closer to that. And we did. So I think, having kind of a porous mindset where you can let other ideas in and look outside the confines of your own space, I think can really help as a leader.
So for me, as a leader, as Lauren said, you have to be willing to listen. You got to be a good listener. And then also, I believe that you have to be willing to also do the work too. And so I found the most success for my engineers and my staff when they realized that I'll also stay late. I'm not going to be an armchair general. I will roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty. I'll do whatever it takes to get the product out the door. I'll do the testing. Just let me know what I need to do, and I'll be a team player. And when I show that much that I care about the product also, that I'm not just going home with my family, I'm going to sit behind with us and make sure we get the product on time. That's when everybody's eyes lit up. Look, guys, we're going to have a pizza party. We're doing all this. Food's coming in. Let's get the job done on one big team. And people, that resonate with everybody. That, hey, he's willing to roll up his sleeves and get dirty with the rest of us.
I think for me, when I was applying to medical school or even to undergrad, I think a lot of people tell you what you're supposed to do. They're like, do these check boxes, this is how you're gonna get in, things like that. But I think when you really become a leader is when you say, those things I don't really resonate with, I'm not gonna do them. Maybe I don't wanna do research, maybe I don't wanna shadow, I wanna work on my own passions. And I think that's when you really turn into a leader. If you're not leading others, you're leading yourself and you're inspiring others. Dermatological was something that I really wanted to work on. And so all the research, all the clinicals, all the shadowing, I kind of built dermatological to kind of have all those facets, but it was also a passion of mine. And it's really the essence of my being that goes into the organization. And so I would say, don't be scared to deviate from the norm, kind of put on those horse blinders. And it's okay if you don't fulfill all the checklists of a road that someone else has already paved. Paving your own is just as important and just as fruitful.
So
you're here.
I want to come back to Stony Brook's role in potentially creating or catalyzing innovation entrepreneurship out of the students, faculty, staff, postdocs, medical students on this campus. I spent a lot of my career at Stanford where people say, oh, there's something in the water at Stanford that, ideas turn into startups. And the water's better on Long Island, I think, than Stanford. So I don't think it's in the water, but it's a culture, it's an ecosystem, it's a history that goes back to the 1950s. And one of the things that attracted me to Stony Brook was when I look at the excellence of this university across so many dimensions, and I look at Long Island, which is a place, it's a wonderful place to live. I think it's the best kept secret in the country. I had no idea what an amazing place this was to live until I moved here, and what a warm and welcoming community is. So we have all the ingredients. Here we have an excellent university, we have a wonderful place to live. We have, well, maybe not as great weather as California, but we have great weather, we have the ocean. We have the most vibrant city in the world right on our doorstep. So what can we do here at Stony Brook to inspire more of our students and our faculty and our healthcare workers and our medical students to think about that brilliant idea they have in the shower, or that they discover in their research lab, or that they're thinking about in a course project, to think about, could I actually turn this idea into something really impactful? What can we as a university do? We don't need to reinvent what happened at Stanford because it's a different era with the internet and with entrepreneurship happening everywhere. So what can we do? This is your opportunity to tell the president, the #1 public university in New York, how do we make Stony Brook a catalyst for Long Island and beyond of innovation and entrepreneurship?
So I'll answer that first because it's one of my pet peeves. We've got brilliant scientists here, brilliant faculty. However, the commercialization process is tough. So if we can smoothen out that process, if somebody has an idea and how they can see the roadmap to commercialize it, and it's not so many hurdles we got to jump over, we can go a lot further. I've spoken with Dean Singer here quite a number of times about how do we make this easier for a scientist or a faculty member. I have an idea. What do I do with it? How do I commercialize this? And so and there are a lot of universities I've spoken to. This is not not a sole problem with Stony Brook, but it's more of a universal problem. But I think we can solve this. And with your entrepreneurship background, I know we can solve it because we're the #1 public university.
That's right. Yes, and I welcome ideas on what we can do. So let me hear that from the other panelists. What can we do? What should we do at Stony Brook to make that process easier?
One thing that we've done is to try to help our employees develop their potential is develop a rather disciplined coaching and mentoring program. So to be a mentor, you go through a training process, and the same for to be a coach, which is more complex. I remember the comment when I was moving into or had taken over the position of president because our COO at that time had a heart attack. I ran some ideas about something by him because he had long experience in business and it was a new language to me. And his response was, "You're thinking about it the right way," which was somewhat frustrating at the time. He didn't tell me that what my conclusion should be. But I often recall that in terms of, okay, I'm uncertain, but that's because there's a lot of uncertainty and probably I'm fairly close to something reasonable, and so I can share it and obviously test it with other people. So that's kind of the mentor and the coaching approach to build up people's awareness and skill set in terms of thinking about things the right way. I certainly agree with Derek in terms of it takes a bit of a village often to commercialize something, and by commercialize, I don't mean necessarily profit, generating profit, but creating value. And there are many skills involved with that, and to be able to form a team and to find other people that have the skills that complement what you're not quite so focused on or passionate about is a tremendous help. My father would say, and I refer to him because he was more of an entrepreneur than I was in the history of our company. His attitude was you plan for success. You have to prepare for failure. But he was not very good at that. He was great at generating the enthusiasm, the confidence, plan for success. But it's a good idea to team up with somebody that's helping you also prepare for if the experiment turns out to have a negative result, so you can still have enough marbles to try the next experiment.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think continuing to really up the efforts on tapping into the alumni network. So I graduated in '84 and had virtually no contact with this institution for decades. And then I got a call one day from Deborah Lowen Klein saying, would I be interested in being a mentor? And I said, okay, and it's been an incredible experience. But I think I never really thought about it. It took the call of one person to just randomly reach out and make the effort to make a connection, and it's turned into a relationship that I very much value. So I think, if there's a way to do more of that and make those connections rather than, just sort of waiting for that random call that may not come.
I absolutely agree. Our alumni are such inspiring people. It's been an honor to get to know them, and I would like to tap our alumni network more because they are just such an incredible resource and inspiring to me and our students as well.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I will say my UCLA mentor got me interested in starting dermatological, and she actually wrote my letter of recommendation for medical school. And over at UCLA, so UCLA is the #1 public university in California, they have a dedicated mentor-mentee website, and then they also have a dedicated mentor alumni board as well. So every month they meet, and then they create events in New York City or in SF for Bruins in New York or Bruins in California. And so I would definitely recommend that. I think another thing too that makes it difficult at Stony Brook is it is a commuter university. So a lot of students, once they finish with classes, they head home. And I think students bond when they're in the dorm rooms or in late night clubs or organizations. And I think that's where most of the innovation and most of the bonding happens. So if there's some way to get students to stay on campus, I think that would be a great idea if it's monetarily feasible or something like that. And I'm not sure if I have any more ideas, but I do know that Stony Brook has that capacity and that potential. I remember just last year, Stony Brook invited Zara Larson to come, and that was even before she was famous, and now she's all over and doing her tour. So I know that we have the capability to spot talent, and so I don't think this is not within our capacity to do.
Right. I mean, we're actually not a commuter school. More than half of our students live on campus, but one of our goals is that every student that wants to live on campus can live on campus. That's part of our strategic vision because it makes such a difference in academic success and other success outside the classroom. So our panel is coming to an end. I'd like to give each of you a minute or so to provide any final closing remarks and maybe words of inspiration to the innovators in the audience and budding innovators in the audience.
Well, to the innovators out there in the audience, I would tell you that I'm nobody special. I've made a lot of wrong choices. So if life is multiple choice, I've chose A, I got it wrong. I chose B, I got it wrong. I chose C, so the last answer was D, and what do you know, I became smart all of a sudden. So I would say if I can do it, then anybody in the audience can also do it.
I would just say, I would just say I've been incredibly impressed by the young people that I've met being a mentor here as part of the Women's Leadership Council. And I'm always inspired by the level of curiosity and passion and ambition among students here. So I don't know what the secret sauce is. I can't put my finger on exactly what it is that happens here that creates that. But I will say that it's very, very impressive and very inspiring to me. And I feel like as a mentor, I certainly get back just as much as I give. And it's just a very special place, and very excited that you're taking the helm, and wish you every success.
Thank you.
I will say that the most fruitful experiences I've ever had was when I put myself out there. And I know it's hard, I know it's challenging, and I know that you think everyone is staring at you, everyone's judging you, but it's through these opportunities you're really able to grow, and you're able to see what works, what doesn't work, what do people resonate with. And I think when you start with a story, that story takes you so far. I think people truly resonate through stories. Dermatological was born out of a story, and when you're able to get people to really resonate with your mission and your goals, and you truly put your essence and your being into that passion, I think that's where success really is.
Well, this has been a pleasure for sure. Innovation can be a way of life. It's kind of like learning. And I think that Stony Brook does so many things right in terms of providing team experiences and providing the tools to go out there and make a difference. I would say that when President Goldsmith commented that she learns from her students, absolutely true, but I always find that I learn when I'm trying to teach somebody something. And it's kind of scary often when I realize how confused my thoughts are until I put some effort into trying to explain them to somebody else. But for that, I'm grateful for this. I hadn't, my first response when I was asked to be on this panel was to decide I should define innovation. So I looked it up in Wikipedia, and apparently that's what everybody understands. The application of create, it's not the same as creating, but it is applying it. So this has been a learning experience for me and inspiring for me, and I thank you for that. And best of luck.
So it's very sad to end this panel because it's been so inspiring and thought-provoking, insightful. I'm so proud to have all of you connected to our wonderful university and part of my inauguration. You mentioned our students and mentoring. We didn't have a chance to talk about mentoring, but I know that our students get so much out of the mentoring, including formal panels like this, as well as the Leadership Council and other mentoring that you've done with our students. And they are incredibly inspiring. I do believe that the students at Stony Brook can go change the world. They're ambitious, they're bold, they're grateful for the education they're getting here, and they want to give back. They want to give back to their communities, they want to give back to their country and to the world, to change the world for the better. So we have the raw ingredients here to be innovative and to really have tremendous impact. And I've been incredibly fortunate as president to travel around the country and meet our alumni all over the country. We have innovators, entrepreneurs, successful businessmen, some that we didn't even know were our alumni. I've met people that got their degrees from Stony Brook and we didn't even know about it. And they all talk about the power of this special university, the community that they found here, the education they got, the mentorship and the inspiration from their teachers, and to be innovative, to be creative, to not be afraid to fail, to take risks. So I want to encourage all of you to take the lessons of this panel to heart, to be bold, to not be afraid to fail, to harness creativity for good, and find partners, find mentors, find the people that you will lead and that will lead you to take those ideas into fruition. And I believe that being innovative and bold happens everywhere. It happens in big companies, happens in small companies, startups, it happens in universities, it happens everywhere. And I've been so proud to lead this university in crafting a bold vision for Stony Brook that we will execute together, bringing innovation and creativity from everybody on this campus, everyone in our community. So this was just a wonderful panel to showcase the power of innovation to change the world and also what it will do for this special university. So I'd like to once more thank our amazing panelists. Thank you so much for being here in part of my inauguration. And I wish you all the rest of a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Okay.